Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. This is, are you primed for astral projection? Before we get into it, I just want to mention that take a look at the bell icon and make sure you've selected the one that's a solid bell. That way you'll get all the notifications for Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning when the new podcasts are posted, and you won't miss out on an important one. Next, hit the like button if you like the podcast. I'd very much appreciate that. So how do you know if you're primed for astral projection? I got this idea by taking a look at one of my favorite books, and I bought this originally back in the 70s. The title is The Projection of the Astral Body by Sylvan Muldoon and Hereward Carrington. Though this was the second astral projection book I read, it was actually written decades before Monroe's Journeys Out of the Body appeared in 1972. This book was published in London in 1929. So, these individuals, Sylvan Muldoon in particular, were the progenitors of folks that we know a lot better, for instance, Robert Monroe. But they started talking about the modern astral projection or out-of-the-body experience phenomena years before, Monroe would start having his experiences and eventually publish his groundbreaking book. One of the sections that I liked and I wanted to talk about was a passage that talked about, are you ready to astral project? Are you sufficiently primed for the experience? And how do you know if you are? Now, the first step, of course, always has to be desire. You must desire to astral project, and it must not be a frivolous desire. It's got to be something to which you are willing to devote a good portion of your energy and consciousness to promoting. Now, it's going to happen when it's going to happen, but you must prime yourself, get yourself ready for the experience so that it can happen as soon as possible. Now, Sylvan Muldoon talks about the various desires that help you to leave the body. And, he gets into things like desiring water or food, sex, a wide variety of basic desires that can help to be the spark, the impetus to beginning the projection. But we know today that while those things are still very true, that we also have a lot of other resources that we can avail ourselves of to make sure that we are ready to astral project. For instance, podcasts like Astral Club and numerous other creators out there who are publishing non-fear-based, reality-based, actual experiences of astral projection or out-of-the-body experiences. And these are crucial. Listening to tapes, music that is perhaps is unearthly, that you think of as related to astral projection. Read books like the one I just mentioned with Sylvan Muldoon, and of course books by famous people like Robert Monroe and others. Just make sure they're non-fear-based books. Now, if you're doing all of this, you're basically priming the pump. You're getting yourself prepared to astral project. If you are doing it properly, and properly is a tough word for me because it implies that there's one way to do it and no other ways. The problem is, and this is something I encounter all the time when people ask me, how long is it going to take until I have my first projection? Everyone's different. Everyone learns at different speeds. Everyone's subconscious functions in a little bit of a different way based on how we were raised, based on our life experiences. So what might work for me may not work for you. It's kind of like some drugs that doctors prescribe. One drug may be a lifesaver for one particular individual, but if you give it to another one, he'll have an allergic reaction that almost ends his life. They're both humans, but they reacted different ways to the stimulus, in this case, a particular prescription drug. But there are some basic things, some basic signposts that if you have primed yourself for an experience, if you've begun to initiate the education of the subconscious mind, because that's the hardest part of your mind to reach, that which exists just underneath your conscious mind. So what are some of the symptoms that Sylvan Muldoon here mentioned in his book? He said, number one, you should dream of a projection of the astral body. I recall that when I was younger, when I was a child, I would have dreams of astral projection, quite apart from my actual astral projections. And so I'd wake up and I'd say, oh boy, that was a great dream. And now I want to astral project for real. And then quite often I'd be able to astral project when I went back to sleep after having an intense dream. Number two, I love this language. Keep in mind, as I said, this was written in the 1920s. You should somnambulate physically. I love that word. We don't use that word much nowadays. Of course, somnambulate is just a fancy word for walking in your sleep. One of the indications that you're priming yourself properly is to awaken and find yourself getting out of bed. I recall, once again, now as a child, that I would quite often walk in my sleep, and I'd find myself sleeping on the sofa downstairs, or rather my parents would find me after they'd put me to bed downstairs. What that indicated was that my subconscious mind was active. It was oriented towards movement, and that is a definite good sign that you are ready or getting ready to astral project. Number three, you should awaken in the night with the desire with the desire upon your mind. I just love that language. You should wake up thinking about astral projection. There you go. That, once again, indicates that your subconscious mind is thinking about it, such that you wake up and that thought is still on your mind. In other words, it's made its way from the subconscious to the conscious mind, and you woke up thinking about astral projection. That is a major indicator that the subconscious is definitely preparing itself to astral project. And eventually, you should then experience a conscious projection. Now, he goes on to say, if none of these manifestations occur, there is but one explanation. Either you imagined that you were prepared through desire to project, or you're experiencing unconscious astral projections. And that is an excellent point. I would estimate, much like icebergs, that the majority of projections, probably about 70 or 80%, actually are done unconsciously. I call them sleepwalkers. I see sleepwalkers when I'm projecting, especially if I'm in the lower astral, because that's typically where your sleepwalkers will end up by default. And I see these sleepwalkers walking around. I know they're not deceased because they have that sparkly, fibrous grouping that we call the astral cord coming from the back of them. So I know they still have a functioning physical body. But the problem is that they definitely had a desire to move about. Now, maybe they're not even into astral projection. Maybe the reason they're moving about is they have some other desire on their mind. Perhaps if they're a young man or a young lady, they're thinking about visiting a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And that desire, since it can't be manifested physically, let's say at 2 a.m, not without getting into a lot of trouble with your parents, but in your subconscious mind kicks your astral body out. But your consciousness is not keyed in, which is a vital part of a conscious astral projection. But this happens, and it happens quite often. I suspect that most people who say they've never astral projected, what they really mean is, even though they don't realize, is that they've never consciously astral projected. Because they've done everything right, but they just haven't gotten to the point yet where they've gotten into the practice of being conscious and continually conscious throughout a projection. I know it's happened to me. I know it's happened to other projectors that they suddenly become conscious in the middle of a projection. They didn't start conscious, but they became conscious. For instance, there's been a number of times where I awoke in what I call an astral school, where a lecture is occurring in what I consider a classroom environment, because it makes sense to me as a classroom. It was interesting because the classroom that I woke up in the one time, they had these wooden desks that I had back in elementary school. So I guess my subconscious mind still had that as, what a classroom looks like. And of course, in the astral, it's very easy for an image to be applied to a particular individual based on what they consider to be an accurate representation of a class. I imagine someone from another area of Earth or another planet would have a very different visualization, but the same rules apply. Some sort of lecture was going on. I remember back in the 70s, and they were talking about all kinds of things like quantum mechanics. They were talking about the holographic universe. None of that meant anything to me when I was in middle school. And when I became conscious in that astral school, I got up and I went off and did my own little astral projection. But the fact of the matter is that I was so primed to astral project that I was off in astral school until I became fully conscious. So that is a big answer to the question to a lot of people as to why they feel they've never had astral projection. And the better way to say that is why they've never had a conscious astral projection. The conclusion I'd like you to reach based on this passage from Sylvan Muldoon's The Projection of the Astral Body is to not give up hope, not give up too easily. We exist in a world, at least here in the West, where we demand everything quickly. We want it delivered to us, and we want it there very quickly. The amount of patience that our ancestors used to have to achieve a variety of goals and what have you is in short supply nowadays. People like Amazon have made billions of dollars supplying us with the same crap we always bought elsewhere, but now it's more convenient. You press a couple of buttons, and before you know it, it arrives on your doorstep. So understand that if your subconscious and your conscious mind is well primed for astral projection, that these types of experiences will start occurring. And be patient, because the chances are that you're having unconscious projections and you just don't realize it yet. So it's not that you can't astral project, it's that you can't consciously astral project as of right now. So that's a topic I wanted to cover. I hope it gives hope to people who think they've been trying a long time. And I think that's important because we shouldn't give up too soon, especially when it comes to something as important as earth-shattering, as soul-altering as astral projection. We need to invest the time and the energy and the patience in achieving this amazing ability. Well, I hope you liked that. If you did, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. 80% of you are subscribed. That's amazing. It's incredible. Most providers are glad if they get 10 or 20%. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do it. It doesn't cost anything. And make sure that bell is solid so that you're notified when the Wednesday afternoon and the Saturday morning podcasts become available. This is Rick, and as always, I will see you on the astral plane.